This combat robot is called Derive, a 13.6 kilogram machine designed to fight in the largest competition of its kind in Australia. With both lifting forks and a small spinning weapon, it is intended to keep an opponent perpetually unstable and control them into being stuck on a wall or otherwise disabled. Last time we had just got it driving, lifting and spinning, with a week to go before competition. The lifter and drivetrain had been working well after ironing out a few faults, but the spinner had not been properly tested. That's first on the agenda. Soon after, it was shipped off to Brisbane for the Robowars National event to meet and compete against robots from all around the country. Smashing the disc into a heavy steel object would be ideal testing, but without an arena there is really no safe way to do that. Instead, it was settled on to hit a length of aluminium extrusion to reduce shrapnel and potential impact damage. The robots lined up with a slow motion camera to see if anything could be picked up. The extrusion flew pretty far, and after a few tests it went straight up to almost brush the power lines. It doesn't take a genius to see what could go wrong there, so things were concluded for the night. One thing learnt was that spin-up time was not what I had hoped for. After messing with the motor controller, the allowed current was increased to 35 amps, until the limiting factor was the belt slipping. In the interest of simplicity, I'm running a timing belt on its flat side with two smooth pulleys. Very robust and easy to make, but its peak transmissible torque is determined by friction alone, instead of the teeth or grooves found on other belts. It came back to bite me during competition, so I can't recommend it if proper belting is an option. Final modifications came in the form of longer forks and a set of wedges. Lengthening the forks meant greater stability when lifting. This is due to effectively lengthening the lever that the robot's mass and frame forms to counteract the torque of raising an opponent. It's also why the lifter pivot is so far back on the robot, again having this lever or moment as long as possible for the fixed weight force. The wedges are designed to deflect horizontal hits by glancing weapons upward like a mirror bouncing light, if the light weighed in excess of 4 kilograms and was travelling at 200 kilometers an hour. These were welded together using the TIG process by a friend, as my experience is mostly with MIG. TIG uses a torch to superheat an area with separate filler rod dipped in to add material, compared to MIG, which passes current through the continuously feeding rod to create heat. Generally, one has better control and less mess with TIG. For mortals like me, MIG is relegated to only rough, mild steel jobs, with TIG preferred for aluminium, stainless, or anything that needs to be as strong as possible. At this point, time was up. The robot was loaded into a suitcase with many tools and a few spare parts and to head off to Brisbane. I was taking the train from Sydney due to the more or less non-existent baggage restrictions. Interstate train services from Sydney are pulled by the XBT. Despite having run on steam-era rails with rolling stock more or less unchanged for 40 years, it's quite comfortable, with the overnight sleeper service taking us to Brisbane. Running speed is only 100 kilometers an hour due to poor track conditions, so the trip takes about 13 hours. Once in Brisbane, the robot was unloaded to prepare for the event starting the next day. The large arena used for fights is predominantly made of steel box section and polycarbonate panels, hardened steel skirting boards, and a wooden floor that gets very much destroyed as the event progresses. Joining me on the team for this event was Jordan from Sydney and Chris all the way from Perth. Apart from just having friends around, it's helpful to have more than one person maintaining these machines, as it's a lot more work than ants or beetles. Due to the dangerous nature of these robots, one must pass certain safety checks before being allowed to compete. They must prove the robot safely stops all motion when the radio is disconnected, and have the spinning weapons be below a certain speed. This speed is defined by the tangential velocity at the outer diameter of the weapon, which in this case is a maximum of 60 meters per second. The weapons are measured with a tachometer to read RPM, and some maths is done to determine the tip speed from that.
Here we go. 7,800 RPM. I was close with 8,000. Yep. Here we go.
Despite working just fine before leaving Sydney, one drive motor was not cooperating. We didn't have time to investigate the fault before the first match, so drastic action was taken. Derive's motors are of the censored brushless type, meaning there are 3 Hall effect sensors in the motor to read the position of the rotor, passing this back to the motor controller to properly time the pulsing of phases. One of these was not working, so the controller was switched to sensorless control. This pretty incredible technology senses the rotor position by small oscillating potentials travelling back down the same 3 wires that gives power to the motor. It's how most drone motors work. Unfortunately, it's not very good in this situation for a few reasons, so the robot now drove poorly. For this event, a robot gets 3 fights against random opponents and is then seeded based on their record, and the record of the robots they defeated. The top 8 out of 24 go through to the finals. Obviously, the intended outcome is to win the first 3 fights to guarantee a path to the finals, after which any loss means one is out of contention. Without time to spare, we loaded in for our first featherweight fight against Bob, a steel-plated horizontal spinner. Derive had the wedges fit for this fight to do its best to deflect their weapon.
Alright, Derive picking up that weapon. Bob, moving around the arena, but not swinging his blade. And lifting and flipping Bob. Looks like Bob fixed his drive patterns, but counted more. 20 seconds in. Derive grinding on Bob there. Derive smashing Bob against the wall again there. Not sure if that weapon has stopped functioning on Derive, or whether it's Derive going in for another lifting stack. Taking it slow. It's slow out of Derive. It looks like one of his drive motors still wiggling around the arena. Motion towards Bob. Bob, definitely the aggressor in there. Later in this battle. Six, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Luckily for us, Bob had not got their weapon working in time for the first fight, meaning what little control Derive had went basically unchallenged. Unluckily though was the smoked components. In order to get the sensorless drive working, the current limits were cranked from 30 up to 60 amps, and the startup power increased too. The failed drive side had a slightly tighter belt, so it pulled more current than the left. Eventually, the motor burnt out and shorted. In turn, the motor controller kept trying to move it, and eventually smoked up as seen in the fight. This was the one controller giving power to the receiver. It thankfully kept running just long enough to finish the fight, but it died when the robot was powered off. A win is a win, but repair involved completely strip the robot to replace the failed components. I was fortunate enough to have Chris and Jordan to assist with this. Turns out one of the sensor wires had stretched and broke during transport from Sydney and caused our issues. Not sure how that happened, but the replacement parts worked a treat.
Okay. We've just been spending a lengthy period of time getting Derive all fixed up. Had to replace the receiver, a drive motor and a drive ESC.
Oh, that was a lot better.
Yes! A lot smoother, a lot straighter. That's what we want.
This is excellent. It's been a...
Now get that weapon going. Here we go.
It's taking a while. Yeah. Oh, hang on.
What's wrong?
I think the belt is slipping. Yeah, I thought I
saw that too. Okay.
Oh yeah, belt's slipping. Okay, we can
Bit of slack on there.
That's an easy fix.
Alright. We can fix that, no problem. Main thing is, it drives smoothly.
Second fight was against Zapper, built by Mark. This robot has a large spinning drum out front, That was the maximum allowable weight and the maximum allowable speed, and armoured in steel that made it more or less impenetrable to my small disc spinner. The wedges on Derive were swapped out for forks, not for the ground game, but the tall sections added designed specifically to ward off vertical spinners like this. Ideally, a drum would glance off the hard steel and not penetrate the paper-thin armour behind it. The goal was to prop it up on one of the flat sides, leaving it unable to get down. Powering the drum was a large in-runner geared down, meaning spin-up time would be too fast for an attempt at box rushing.
Let's go, James.
At least the drum can't be I think you mentioned that attack the opponent before they can get up to speed. Sounds good. Take his time to line up that. Upside down. Now, if you lose the wheel, you need to be able to show that you can attack your opponent. Which is amazing. Making the iron dancing. So now this comes down to can you take a giant attack zapper? Those rules on Derive look like they've been fairly well bent. He's going into the weapon instead.
No, for a drum that's supposedly unbalanced, that's pretty good.
It's all points to Derive.
Gotta move.
Zapper forces spin out the plane and throwing off wide. The back of the wheel. Derive using an opportunity to get up under. Sparks flying as those weapons go head to head. Zapper getting show control motion. Start counting around in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and the win goes to Derive.
A fairly hairy fight for sure. Zapper's drum did a good job of mangling the lifter forks and managed to vibrate itself down from being on its side. They eventually stopped moving when the wheel hub stripped out, leaving the drive gearbox shafts free spinning and not passing any torque to the wheels. Derive's forks were so bent they had to be straightened in a hydraulic press, with one having the curled tip cut off as there was no way to grip the end with enough force. Chunks were taken out of the HDPE side armour as well, but it did its job protecting the wheels. Something I want to highlight is just how incredible of a material the Hardox steel forks are. It's got a Brunel hardness of 600 on the surface, which is quite a lot, but can bend very far without cracking and just get bent back. I'm sure it would eventually work harden, but those lifter forks got bent back and forth every few fights without breaking. Pretty crazy stuff.
Right, we've just done a bit of maintenance on Derive. We had to try and straighten the frame because it was a little bit bent after that last fight. We put new wheels on, and we had to sort out the tension issue with the spinner. It's,
Right on the ground, more or less.
yeah, looks pretty good. Oh, down to the floor with the forks.
The final round robin opponent was Final Cut, built by Jules and Miles, which was in rough shape. That is, the robot, not the people. They had just fought a large vertical spinner named Smell the Cheese, and had the front panel ripped from the chassis, followed by the dangling electronics being annihilated. It was rebuilt, but was now too heavy to run their spinning disc, and had to switch to a saw blade. This wasn't as bad as it seemed though. The thin blade could slip through the gaps in my armour and slice drive or weapon belts.
Come on, James.
Both robots spinning up those blades. Final cut saw designed to cut into its opponent after it's been replaced on a previous vertical spinner disc. Derive going with the lifter, trying to lift and stack final cut against the wall. Derive needs to release final cut.
That's it, keep flicking.
That's it! Giving final cut the opportunity to get the upper hand in this battle. Staying on with that lifter.
That's it, keep on it.
Final cut off balance. 1 minute into this fight. Even stacking final cut against the wall. Is final cut able to bring itself? 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, driving upside down. Punishing the back of final cut there. 1 minute to go in this battle.
That's a hell of a pirouette.
30 seconds to go. Now final cut does it. Does need to show control translation towards Derive.
Leave it.
Final cut stuck there.
Leave it. 15 seconds.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Is there a slight possibility that that bent washer was there from the very beginning, as if of the whole thing?
Possible. It is possible it came from the first fight.
I'd hoped I would have noticed, but you never know.
Yeah.
About halfway through the fight, Final Cut got stuck on their side, but I chose to get them down to have a longer match. These events are paid spectator ones, so a good show helps bring them back. If this was a win, it meant going on to the finals. A longer match means a higher chance of issues cropping up to be fixed now rather than later and lose that later fight. Derive actually did some damage. The spinner hit and bent their dead axle that the wheel runs on, leading to a jam, which is why they lost that side of Drive. Through all this, we had been fighting a problem with Derive's drivetrain. The idler pulley is steel on steel with no bearings and had a tendency to start galling up. Every 2 fights or so, we pulled it off to repack it with grease. I'll be switching to ball bearings next time, as it's a lot of friction due to the high forces on that part. With 3 wins, it was finals time. Derive was ranked 3rd, so fighting presumably the 6th ranked robot. Derive's first real test against a horizontal spinner was the quarter-final opponent in Baba Yaga, built by Harley. This robot has an enormous bar spinner that is wider than my robot, and all hardox, so not much if anything for Derive to damage. Both our robots used big brushless drive with small reduction to printed wheels. Electrically and system mechanically, both robots were about the same except for Derive's lifter. While Baba Yaga is an undercutter, when flipped their blade will be on top of the robot. Derive is small enough it should fit harmlessly underneath. So the objective was to see how fast their weapon spins, and invert them and keep that way.
But direct damage trying to go straight up and under, Derive trying to go straight up and under and not give Baba Yaga the time to spin up that weapon. Looking to press its advantage, keep that big blade from spinning up. Throughout this fight, multiple flips there, and Baba Yaga is upside down. Still trying to press its advantage while upside down, but it looks like one of those front forks has been bent in that impact. Derive just not giving Baba Yaga the time that he needs to spin up. After 10 seconds, Derive has to release Baba Yaga, giving him that little bit of space and coming back in for the flip. Upside down, Baba Yaga spinning up that blade. Derive lifting up that gyro, keeping that blade perfectly stable as it flies up into the air. 2 minutes left in this fight. Babiaga looks like it's trying herself right, isn't able to move. Looks like it's beating against the score. 10, 9.
Things went more or less to plan, staying on them and keeping their bar from spinning up. Eventually the drive belts fell off his robot, as this was an issue plaguing his matches. Baba Yaga landed one good hit on Derive's weapon when it was spun down, though which caused significant damage to the assembly. Both 16mm thick aluminium weapon uprights were bent a bit. More critically, the aluminium weapon pulley was proper smashed. I figured it would be fine and protected between the weapon discs, but the metal was compressed so hard some extruded through the holes in the steel discs. Everything was straightened in the hydraulic press as much as possible. Some bolts were bent, washers were pulled through, and a thrust washer smashed. Though the weapon assembly was now not very square, it spun up, and that was good enough to progress to the semi-finals.
Belt's still a little loose.
Yeah, a little bit wobbly belt, but
Sort of. So if we get sticky stuff, it should fix them. Yeah.
yeah.
Right. Sweet. Won't waste any more power.
Probably the playoff robot we were most concerned about, Obliterator, owned by Angus, is a decently old machine with a reputation for doing a lot of damage and not really stopping. Entirely made of hardox and a max weight, almost max spin speed bar. More importantly, it has fought before and had the issues ironed out, so it's very unlikely the weapon would stop spinning. Also known was the fact that the weapon's spin-up time was much faster than Baba Yaga, so rushing and pinning wouldn't be much use here. In previous fights, it had gotten hung up on certain bolts, as Obliterator's ground clearance is even less than mine. Therefore, the plan was to flip Obliterator over so the carbon fibre side was down, the side with the highest protrusions, and push from behind to ram the weapon into the wall and see what becomes of it.
3, 2, 1,
But what's setting up those flames? Obliterate flying any chances. Flying around the arena, and Derive is upside down, looking to try and stack Obliterator up against the wall. Obliterator getting up the flame, but Derive shoving him into the corner. Before coming to Obliterator gets that blade up to speed. But Derive not giving up and not giving Obliterator a chance to get the upper hand. Throwing him around the arena. Looks like Derive has lost one of its drives, and so has Obliterator.
Oh no.
This might be a slightly less intense second half of the fight.
Both of them being
as
out
these
drives
two
better
robots
for Angus.
try and make their way towards their opponents. Now the rule is that as far as you can...
Oh, there's your weapon motor. Or no, drive motor. No, drive motor. The weapon's still spinning.
Looks like Obliterator has ejected its weapon motor.
Oh, there we go. Hey! Yes! Barks in the cab.
Ending that fight in flames.
He gets the sand.
Wait, where was it? What did catch fire? Because
I assume it was the.
It was out of this wheel.
Super simple.
the flames were coming out
Oh
of the
wait,
wheels.
no. If that's shorted, then it probably would have been the drive. Oh yeah.
Oh.
There you go.
Oh yeah.
That's
Oh, that's a new one. I haven't done that for a while.
Very toasty.
Burnt off the fats.
So I wonder, because the motor came loose and then these shorted? As
Yeah,
in,
that would have been why.
Alright.
That's good. I thought the weapon.
Yeah, no, it just
That was a
kept
good
going.
fight, guys. That was really fun to
Yeah.
watch.
Rightio. One to go.
Not the way I expected things to go, but a fortunate ending for sure. Surprisingly, Derive's little spinning disc, in combination with the wedges, did a very good job at deflecting Obliterator's bar. The slow motion footage provided by James Blue did a great job of showing all sorts of strange things in this fight. I'll show a few key shots here. The reason Derive briefly lost its drive side was due to debris in the motor originating from inside the chassis. Around the motors are posts that keep the wires and motor controllers from being eaten by the spinning can. These were printed out of ABS plastic, as that's what I'm good at. During this impact, the shock back through the chassis broke the top off the post, and it seemed to jam the motor from the inside. This second impact freed it, which allowed the final push and pin. In the future, all internal printed parts will be made of TPU plastic, as the layer strength and shock resistance is significantly higher than ABS. With that fight won, we got ready for the grand finale against Fling King, built by Glenn. This robot is unlike any other in the event, being a CO2 flipper. It stores energy in a bottle of liquid CO2 held at 3000 psi, to then release in a piston, in turn firing the flipping arm. Old versions of this robot were able to send robots into the roof of the arena, so we prepared the robot to avoid that. We didn't want to bank on winning the ground game, as the spring-loaded and ground forks and wedges on Fling King were more effective than ours. Rather, 2 of the fixed forks were shortened, so if the lifting forks managed to slip between the gaps, the fixed ones wouldn't then ride up and prevent a lift. It was noticed before this fight that, after turning the robot upside down for the first time in the event, every single bolt on the bottom of the robot was loose and the lifter ones had fallen out completely. Bolts got tightened and M5 fasteners were driven into the 1032 gearbox mounts as the short 1032 bolts had pulled through some thread. As with any gas flipper, the objective is to make them waste the limited amount of stored pressure they have. Typically, this is done by flipping them over and waiting for a self-right, then repeat. The spinner would be used to chip away at the wedgelets, and forks to reduce to their effectiveness at getting under my forks.
Alright, one last test on Derive. We're going to be taking on Fling King in the final, so we're going to try and make sure our forks are sharp, but not too sharp.
There we go. That looks better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we don't want those forks digging up the floor, getting ourselves stuck. That looks looking a lot better. Definitely.
Hitting the floor, but not down.
Let's not waste power. Let's call it good.
Yes.
3, 2, 1, activate.
Spinning up that platform. Running up the Derive has to release Fling King after 10 seconds. Derive's backing up and spinning up that weapon. Popping Fling King over again. Fling King just not the trying to lift and stack him against the wall while dishing out damage with that weapon. 30 seconds into this battle. Derive trying to show dominance by stacking. Derive looking to keep Fling King upside down. Fling King unable to self-right.
Psych!
Fling King back up and over. Derive controlling this battle with that lifter grabber. Derive separating from Fling King, flipping him back over, trying to get Fling King to use up all of his gas before self-righting. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and the win goes to Derive. A big round of applause for Fling King and Derive. And Derive is our Australian National Champion for 2024.
A final win for Derive, crowning it champion of this event. While it may seem like Derive was getting under flinking, this is actually rarely the case, as can be seen in this slow motion footage that the forks just ride straight up the wedges. Glenn had been having issues with the custom gas manifolds leaking over the course of the event, which played a part in why flinking ran out of gas so quickly. It should have had many 4 powerful flips in it. There's a chance of a rematch at the upcoming Sportsman event though, time will tell. A neat feature of flinking is that it's 4-wheel drive, but on rocker pods, so the front of the robot can ride the ground, more like a typical 2-wheel drive flipper, while retaining the benefits of 4-wheel drive. Overall, Derive worked pretty well with the lifter never faltering and the drivetrain doing its thing given the circumstances. The spinner unit has numerous problems to fix, including the continuously slipping belt and overall bentness. Much of the frame is twisted or stretched, but I'm told that's to be expected. Conceptually, the dual weapon robot worked out, as well as the technical gambles with the high voltage censored drive, though it was a bit hairy to start with. It was great to have Jordan and Chris helping to keep the robot running, as well as Glenn allowing the use of his mill to make the weapon discs. Most of the fight footage was provided by James Blue. If you want to watch the full unedited matches, I have linked his channel in the description. Derive will be converted to run as a Sportsman featherweight to compete in March, but should run unconverted to defend its title at the next Open event. If you're interested in combat robots, there may be a club near you that fight smaller or more accessible classes. They're often active on Facebook. Until next time.